Hey, it's the Good Advice Show. We're tuning into another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. Welcome to the show today. I'm Blake Benz. I'm the host of today's episode and the podcast. I don't know why I said that like this is the only one that I do. I'm the host of the entire podcast, and you're tuning into another episode of the show. If you're a first-time listener, this is the show where we try to bring you some good advice, those actionable, tangible things that you can take and apply to your business. This is the place we do it. And so thank you for tuning in today. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to tell you a little bit about the guest we have today. Today's guest is Victor Werley, who's one of the founders of Pinnacle Advisors. Victor is a financial consultant. He's also a forensic economist. And we're going to be talking today about the state of today's financial world. Things like, are we in a recession? What should you be thinking about, especially if you're a business owner? Is this a time to panic and freak out? Or are there some things that you can be doing today that sets you up for the future? All that and more is on today's episode. Of course, before we dive in, let's hear about one of the amazing businesses we like to advertise. Check this out. We'll be back soon. Have you ever been in that situation where you're talking to a prospective customer and they say, hey, so what exactly is it that you do? Have you ever felt that sense of panic as you wonder, well, geez, what do I say? What do I do? Or maybe you say some things that you feel like in your head was very clear and concise, and then you realize you've been rambling for 5, 6, 7 minutes. See, we've all had the pain of knowing that what we sell is amazing, and yet if people don't fully understand it, if they don't get it, they're not ever going to buy from you. More importantly, your impact will never be fully realized if you're not being totally and completely understood. That's why I trust Zach Messler to help me turn my message into something that can be perfectly understood. He's the best in the business for helping you communicate why your product is so amazing. And that's why I love recommending him on the podcast. You can find out more at zachmessler.com. There'll be a link in the episode description for you to check it out. Stop wondering if your customer's getting it, and instead be perfectly understood. Victor, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Blake. I'm glad to be here. I really appreciate it.
Now, you are a partner with Pinnacle Advisors. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what your business does.
Yeah. So, like you, I'm a native Arkansan. Lived in the state my entire life, different parts of the state. And after college, didn't know what I wanted to do. And
Classic.
So I, normal story, right?
Yeah.
I got a job in banking, and I figured out two things very quickly. Number one, that working with people and money, the intersection of people and money was really where I was supposed to be. That was really my calling. But I also figured out that I needed to work for myself because I have an independent streak as wide as the state of Arkansas, and I really struggled, in the banking environment. And there's nothing wrong with the banking environment; it just wasn't for me. And so I left at 23 years old and started a financial coaching and consulting firm. Pinnacle, we've been around since 2003. At this point, we are a financial consulting firm focused on efficiency strategies and financial preparedness for individuals, families, small businesses, and kind of everything in between.
Now, leaving the banking world and starting your own gig, I mean, were you considering yourself an entrepreneur? I mean, have you ever gone down that line of thinking? In hindsight, it's obvious that that's what I was doing. But at the time, I'm blessed to have grown up in a household with parents that worked really, really hard and provided, my siblings and I with a great life and a great upbringing, but they both have always had jobs working for companies and for other people. So when I told my parents that, hey, I'm going to leave my stable bank job and start this consulting business, I think I kind of blew their minds a little bit.
Entrepreneurship is something that I think takes a unique personality type to be able to do and to be interested in. And it's something that appealed to me, even though at that time, I don't think I quite realized. I think I just wanted to get out there and do something that was mine and that was my own, and kind of be the master of my own fate a little bit.
What was it about the banking world that, I know you said there's nothing wrong with the banking world, but what itch did it not scratch for you?
So for me, there were a lot of customers, there were a lot of people that I engaged with on a daily basis who had needs that for whatever reasons, whether it be regulations or, other limitations, we just weren't able to help them. And there were so many people that I was seeing that needed, frankly, they just needed education. They didn't know how to balance a checkbook. They didn't know how a credit card worked. They didn't know how to start a business. They didn't know how to sell a business. They didn't know how to do all these things. And I felt like the bank was there to serve a need, and the banks do that very well, but it's the services that they provide are very reactionary, right? Mm-hmm. Most people don't go to the bank to say, teach me how a Roth IRA works. Teach me how and when I should apply for Social Security. Mm-hmm. Teach me what is my business worth, right? I mean, your banker can't tell you that. They're not qualified to tell you that. And I just saw a hole in the marketplace, especially in Arkansas. There are great companies in our country that they tend to cluster in sort of your major metropolitan areas, and Arkansas is not one of those. And so there just really wasn't a lot of ability for that need to get met. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go out there and change that.
Well, I've been a public school teacher, been an adjunct professor, and even now, almost 20 years later, from when you started the business, I don't think our financial literacy has really changed all that much.
No. Yeah,
I just remember being a teacher and this guy coming from like a financial institution. He was there to get people to open up a Roth IRA. And I was like, what is that? What's a Roth? I had literally never heard the term ever before in my life.
Yep. Yeah. I'm really proud of how much work we've done in the last 20 years, but I'll be the first to admit that we've only scratched the surface. I mean, there's just so many people that just don't know. And it's, not knowing is okay. It's not like it's a huge fault of anyone. You don't know what you don't know oftentimes. And the only way to fix that is to educate yourself, begin learning and seeking out people who can help you with that educational process.
So I feel like for me, there was a time, and I don't know, I think it was around the time when I was a teacher, I was in Houston, Texas. This was like 2010, I guess. And I think I was making like around 55, 60K, no kids, still eating Taco Bell, Subway. Yep. So I had a lot of disposable income. And it was like the first time in my life, like I don't think I'd ever had more than like $300 in my banking account.
Yeah.
So it was the first time in my life where I was like, wow, I have money. Like, what the heck do I even use this on? Point that I'm getting at. I feel like everyone has a moment in their life when they realize, hey, there's some kind of, not riddle here, but like, there's something more to my finances than just like collecting the paycheck. Like when the Roth IRA was explained to me and I started to understand like, what is a 401k? What does it mean to be vested? Like all these different things, it began to open up my eyes to opportunities to make money and wealth that I think a lot of us are ignorant to. And for a lot of our listeners on the show today, a lot of people who are listening today, they started their business for a similar line of thinking of, wow, I have a guy that I talked to who He's been in sales for 20, 25 years. And the way he put it was, I have literally made millions for the corporations that I've worked for. And it's only recently that I began to think about wealth for myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have conversations like this often with your customers. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head, and people go through a natural process. What you described is a normal experience for most people, right? We're in college, we're 22 years old, we have our first job, we're completely broke. Maybe we're worse than broke because we've got student loans and car loans and everything else. But there's a point at which you realize, okay, I need to become more intentional with what I'm doing. I need to have a plan. I don't need to make my financial decisions by default anymore, right? Like that, we all can remember the point at which you live your life over the weekend, and then you check your bank balance on Monday morning to find out how bad it is,
Right.
and that's not intentional. That's, that is living your life by accident. And the thing I try to really preach to our clients, those individual clients especially, is you should have a plan. And yes, that plan should involve leisure. It should involve fun. You should budget to have a good time. You should budget for Taco Bell. You should also budget for retirement, and you should budget for kids, and you should budget for all these other things. And a budget is not a dirty word, even though a lot of people kind of feel that way, right? You say budget and they get all uncomfortable. A budget is not a set of handcuffs. A budget is the lines on the side of the highway that keep you from flying off into the ditch.
Right.
And so it's important to have that plan. And businesses are no different. Small businesses, you've got to be intentional with what you're doing. You've got to pay attention to your P&Ls. You've got to pay attention to these. And the other thing that I talk about a lot is you're not supposed to do it by yourself. There are some really cool technologies and tools out there that help, but you should not be figuring out your finances. You should not be running your business by yourself any more than you should be doing your own dentistry or doing your own surgery, right? Like, find a professional that you connect with, that you trust, that can help you do these things. And I think that's the other thing that's overlooked too, is there's something about finance that a lot of people have this DIY mentality, and they feel like I'm supposed to know this, right? I'm 23 years old. I'm supposed to be an adult, and I'm supposed to do all of the adulting things, and I'm supposed to know how to do this stuff. No, you're not. You're supposed to get someone to help teach you this. Unfortunately, it's not taught in our education system as well as I would like, but we can't change that tomorrow. So people need to know that the resources are out there. The education is out there. The people to help are out there, like you and me.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think about how short term a lot of us are, in the sense of, like you talked about, running a business, managing your P&L. I think there is a group of listeners who maybe don't even know what a P&L is. Yeah. And by the way, that's not to shame you. That's totally normal. When you're a tiny, small business, a lot of this terminology you just aren't aware of, and that's fine. Yep. What I will say though is, in terms of being so short term, I've noticed that a lot of business owners, they budget their business with like a runway of like 3 months. Yeah. Not understanding. And I not, if people have been listening to me, this is going to be totally like, beating a dead horse. But I talk a lot about the 10-year game of entrepreneurship, running a business. Pinnacle Advisors, you guys have been in business for almost 20 years. So I don't know what those first couple of years were like for you. I hope for you they were amazing, but for a lot of people, I know for me, I started the business and I thought I was doing math, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a multimillionaire in like 6 months. I don't think I got my first customer until like my second or third month. And so I bring this up because I know a lot of business owners out there who, they burn the ships, they quit the job, they have $10,000 in savings. And one example, I talked to a woman who she had about 10 grand saved up. It was the first month of her business. And she was like, hey, I'm paying for a commercial. What do you think? And I was like, well, how much is the commercial? And she was like, $8,000. And I was like, ouch. I would not do that if I were you. And she was like, well, I already paid for it. So I don't know what happened to her. I never saw her again. So, but my point is that is the mentality of business owners often is, let me just burn money, throw as much money into this. And they don't have that runway that you're talking about, that intentional plan. Do you come across this yourself?
All the time. Yeah. Business owners, people that have that entrepreneurial gene that they want to do that. A lot of times they are, they're dreamers, right? They're big idea people. They know how their business is going to change the world. And that's amazing. But sometimes they fall short on translating their goals and their vision and their heart with how things are going to hit them, right? The old Mike Tyson quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time. But every time a business owner comes to me with a business plan, and so often, that's a big part of our business is to help get those businesses open, help them get funded, help them get off the ground. We serve as sort of a third-party CFO for a lot of these businesses. You and I are similar in that vein. Do a lot of coaching. I've never seen a business owner come to me with the right expectations in terms of what it's going to cost. And not only do they underestimate how much money they should have, but they look at their P&L, their cash flow statement after the first 2 months, and they're freaking out because it's a negative number. And it's like, we tell them all the time, you judge your household budget on a month by month basis. You judge your business's budget in the first few years on an annual basis, 6 months at the shortest, because you're going to have ebbs and flows. I met this morning with a business in the month of November. Their month of November, they had about $80,000 in the negative for the month of November. But this month, year to date, they'll make $5 million. Mm-hmm. So if you're focused on month to month, November looked ugly, but it looked ugly because they bought a bunch of inventory. They spent money they needed to spend. It's going to make them money in the future. So I was cheering them for having an $80,000, negative number on their P&L, because the move that they made is good for taxes. It's good for strategy. So you can't judge a business on those short-term cycles. It's just, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
It reminds me of a consulting firm I worked for where an average month would be somewhere between 200, 300K. But there was 1 month, we were looking at the financials. There was 1 month that we made $8,000. That's it.
Nice.
It was the month of December.
Yeah.
Because for a couple of reasons, we shut down the business for an entire week. All employees take an entire week off between Christmas and New Year's. And then it was a consulting firm focused around team building, leadership, management. Well, a lot of people aren't paying for big team events in December because people are going on vacation, they're on holiday or whatever. Yep. But I love your insight there, because if you're looking at just December as a localized month, there'd be a lot of panic there. We typically do 300K. We just did $8,000. Yep. Think about how much of that negative is going to be for the month. So,
no, that's exactly right. There's a natural cycle throughout a year that all businesses go through. I don't know of any business that is consistent month over month in terms of their expenses and their income. You have to look at those, and you got to pull the lens back. The other thing that I would say, not to shift gears on you, but this comes to mind too, because this is the thing I feel like I say the most to both individuals and business owners is you have to build your business and get into that flow and get into that routine. But you have to have the understanding that that routine is going to change and it's going to get disrupted. Sometimes good things, sometimes bad things. But wherever you are right now is not where you're going to be in 2 years. It's just not. Hopefully you're better off. Hopefully you continue to grow and climb and improve, but you might not. And so being prepared and expecting change is critical. Things like proper emergency funds, proper insurance, the stuff that's not really sexy. Like no one wants to talk about insurance. I'm sorry. There's nothing exciting about insurance, but not having that done properly can be absolutely devastating. And so it's important to pay attention to those things, even though they're not fun conversations. And especially in a business context, it's important to revisit those on an annual basis. You need to be. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you need to be mindful of that. Was all I was going to say.
Well, I mean, we're 2 years removed. Removed. I mean, we're still living it, but we just COVID, 2020 totally annihilated a number of businesses. Some businesses, and we've talked about this on the show before, some businesses flourished and did really well. When you talk about preparedness, where's the line between I'm doing enough to cover my bases and here's something no one, because it does feel like there's like a fuzziness there of like, I actually had someone who, right after COVID happened, they reached out to me and they're like, hey, what kind of content do you have on like responding to COVID? And I was like, it's a worldwide pandemic, so I don't have any content around, I have some like basic management content, but it's this thing we've never experienced before. There's conversations now about a possible recession. Maybe we're already in a recession. I
would say we are.
I have customers, people I've talked to who, hey, I'm worried about my buyers drying up. What's your take on all of this? And again, maybe a second part of that question, is there a difference between being prepared and fearful, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think that right there is the key point. I think if you are looking at your situation, if you're looking at preparedness from the perspective of, I want to be ready to roll with the punches, I want to be ready to deal with whatever may come, to me, that's good. That's healthy. But if you are living in fear, if you are, filling your basement with dried canned goods and ammunition, I mean,
sorry for all of our bunker people, listeners.
Listen, if that's your thing, that's awesome. But from a business perspective, if you're spending all of your business assets to do that, you're hamstringing your business, right? And so I think that there is a fine line, and this is where you kind of have the art and the science of these coaching models and these financial planning practices, because there's not a one size fits all answer. There's not a magic formula. Generally speaking, I like to tell individuals that 3 to 6 months of household expenses is really your target. And how do you decide between 3 and 6 months? It's kind of based on feel. It's based on what you as the client are most comfortable with. It also depends on where you put that money and where, liquidity and risk factors and things. From a business perspective, it depends on the business. If you are what I call a high velocity business where there's tons of money coming in and out like crazy, I think of like a roofing company. The cash flow swings from money in to money out are enormous. So they need to have a larger cushion than let's say a small insurance agency. I think of another client of ours, this small insurance agency that has these established streams of revenue that are very consistent. Now, they're not predictable. They're not exactly the same, but there's not these huge swings in cash flow. So their need to have cash on hand is a little bit lower, but it's still there. So it's all really relative to the nature of the business, the nature of the economy. There are so many factors that go into it. And to your point on COVID, I think COVID underscores this point. No one could have predicted, obviously, what has happened, but you see the businesses that were at least prepared for an unknown event, frankly, have thrived. It's been a really interesting case study to watch certain businesses collapse utterly, and other businesses absolutely flourish. Mm-hmm. And you start looking, we've started doing surveys amongst our client base and started trying to figure out what was the secret ingredient that helped business A do so well while business B right next door just shut their doors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's interesting too, and this is interesting for our listeners also, there's some kind of insight there on the ability to pivot and innovate. I can think about, I was on a phone call. So my business has always been very digital. We have the podcast, we have digital customers. And that was important to me, maybe because I'm a millennial, who knows? But I remember being on a phone call with someone right as COVID happened, and they did like in-person training events. Okay. And, so, everything was shut down. So they couldn't do it. And we were kind of just swapping notes, and they were like, "Hey, so like, what's your take on like what we should do?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I would shift to digital. Like, if you don't shift to digital, you're dead, basically." Yep. And what was interesting was how they responded was, "Well, you can't replicate what we do in person. Like, that's not an option for us." Their unwillingness to pivot and even maybe burn the ships, they are no longer in business. So, I mean, that's kind of just is what it is, right? And so I just think about, for all of us listening, being able to retool your business, rethink your business, especially when you're forced to, which hopefully, knock on wood, we don't experience something like COVID again, but who knows, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's proven that I certainly was not thinking something on this scale was likely, or frankly, even, was going to happen. No one expected it, but I'm certainly preparing for it to happen again now. I think we all should be. I pray that it doesn't, but it certainly could. Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of our show. I want to, it's great talking to you, Victor, because obviously you're a bastion of knowledge. Like, I can already just tell you got a lot of great insights, and it sounds like you're helping so many different customers. It's grown your expertise to the point that you can very easily jump into, oh yeah, here's what someone should do. Here's what someone should be thinking about. Before we get to the very end of our show, I want to go all the way back to young Victor, 20 years ago, when you started your business, when you got out of banking. Just talk to us, share a little bit about those first few years, first few months. I mean, when you reflect, what are the memories that come to the surface?
You've used the phrase "burn the ships," which is a personal favorite of mine as well. There's a level of commitment that you have to make. You've got to spend enough time when you start a business to be certain that it's what you want to do and it's where you want to be. And then you've got to commit. You've got to wholeheartedly commit, and you can't have one foot on the shore and have a backup plan in mind, because as soon as something goes really bad, you're gonna pull that plug and you're gonna go jump into the life raft. Mm-hmm. And so that is a philosophy that I really had to employ. You said, you hope that my first few years were super successful, and they from a financial perspective, we were not setting the world on fire in the first few years. We were blessed and the business grew, but I will tell you that for me, it was less about financial success and more about seeing success on a personal level. And I will tell you a story. One of my first clients, I was brand new, and this young couple came to me, and they were in their early 20s. They had a little boy, beautiful little baby. And they said, look, we want to get our financial house in order. We want to make sure that we're in good shape. So we kind of just started with the basics and, a simple estate plan, life insurance, make sure their budget was in good shape, go through all their employee benefits, the normal, the stuff you would think that you would normally do. Well, 4 or 5 years go by and they come back. We're having one of our annual meetings and they now have twin little girls. Their son is 3 or 4 and they have twins and the husband has found out he's got cancer and he didn't survive. And so his widow is now a widowed mother of 3 with twin 1-year-old baby girls and a 5-year-old son. And they did the right things. And obviously it was not in their plan for him to not be here, but their plan incorporated the what if. And so she's okay. Even to this day, she's doing great, and the kids are doing well. And it's a tragic situation, but oftentimes those tragic situations, those big unexpected events come with a complete collapse or come with just, these echo effects of tragedy over tragedy over tragedy. And to me, that's where I'm so dogmatic about being prepared. And, that was a big turning point for me, feeling like I got to be a part of helping them really, really crystallized for me that like what I'm doing is helping people and I need to continue to do it because if I don't, maybe no one will.
I had an old boss who would call it rocket fuel. It was those moments that were so, you talked about it being crystal clear. It just wakes you up to your purpose, what you're doing, why it matters. And it's rocket fuel because hopefully it spurns you on to doing even more amazing stuff.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. Victor, it's been so great having you on the show today. We're out of time. For people listening who are like, okay, I think I might need to call this guy. I might need to reach out to this guy. I need some financial help for myself, for my business, especially, as you mentioned, hey, I think we probably are in a recession. And I don't disagree, by the way. I just don't have comments on it because I know nothing about, that kind of stuff. For people listening who are thinking, okay, I want to make sure my bases are covered, but especially for my business, I want to make sure there's a good handle on my finances. I'm thinking the right things, especially as we go into, maybe the next fiscal year. I want to make sure things are straight and on the right path. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. So they can reach out through our website, which is pinnacleadvisor.net, advisor singular, ADVISOR.net. They can also reach out to me directly by email, which is victor@pinnacleadvisor.net. Happy to help anybody that needs it. Anybody in your audience that we can help, I would love to.
Okay. Well, Victor, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was awesome. And you're always welcome back.
I appreciate it. I look forward to coming back in the future. Thank you so much.
Of course. Hey, for our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, what the heck you waiting on? Click the subscribe button and the follow button so we keep bringing you good advice wherever you are. Don't forget, we are on the radio every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time. You can find us more on our website or on our LinkedIn page where we'll share more details on that. And don't forget also, if you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. Having said that, thank you all of you for your support over the many years that have come together to make this podcast what it is. And we'll catch you next time. Have a great time. See you later.